to Revenue Marketing Television live, actually, in this version. I'm Jeff Pedowitz, your host, President and CEO of the Pedowitz Group. And today we have Tim Minahan, who's Chief Marketing Officer of Citrix. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind, right, over the last year and a half?
Yeah, it certainly has. So I joined Citrix about like you said, about 15 months ago, and it certainly has been a whirlwind. A widely recognized brand has been around for 26 years, really going through a transformation, transforming to the cloud, transforming to enable this new kind of digital business environment, and transforming, moving beyond just IT, moving towards helping lines of business actually achieve their business outcomes.
So now you're known as a transformer because I've known you for a while. You've done this at the last couple of companies. And so what's your approach to transforming marketing at Citrix? What are some of the things that you've taken on?
Yeah, well, first, the company transformation to the cloud is not a nominal feat. Benioff and Salesforce may have written the book on how to start a SaaS business from scratch, but no one's really written the book on how to transform an established technology company to the cloud. Having been in both environments, I can say with certitude that the latter is far more complicated because you need to bring your customers along on that journey. You need to bring the market along on that journey. And so when I look at the transformation at the business level, there's really kind of three things. It's less of, technology transformation is one, moving into a multi-tenant architecture, and that's interesting. And as a marketing guy, I can say that's the easy part. The second part is the financial transformation, particularly for a public company to do this in a public environment, transitioning from a professional license model to a subscription model. But the third part, which is, I would argue, the most challenging, which is kind of the cultural and operational transformation. There's a mindset component to it where you're moving from selling products to selling services and ultimately outcomes. And that requires you to change the way you do just about everything, from how you develop product and how you deliver it to market and at what intervals, to how you go to market, to how you market and engage with the market and with customers. And so from a marketing perspective, that also requires you to change the traditional marketing approaches that were in place, right, which were more episodic, events-based, relationship-based, to one where you're leveraging digital much more frequently, where you are mapping not to a sales process that is quickly dying, to more of the buyer journey, where the buyer is in control, where they want to be informed, and you are engaging in dialogue and establishing that trusted advisor role earlier on as they're shaping their decision framework. And that's required us to change a lot of what we do. So I would say there's really three things there. We have a philosophy, number one is to digitize. So increasingly we're making the commitment that all our marketing is digital marketing, allowing us to be much more agile, much more analytical in how we engage the market. Simplify, so really driving everything from data, all of our investments being based on not just a hunch or something we've always done, but being much more strategic. And reimagine, so shifting from selling product again and feature function to selling outcomes that are aligned with what the market wants to achieve.
So you've run a lot of different marketing organizations over the years. Are you finding the function of marketing is changing? Are you needing to run it more like a business than, say, 10 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. The function of marketing is changing in a number of different ways, and it's, as it should be, being driven by the customer. The customer, as I said, now is in the driver's seat. They're far more informed. They're far less trusting. They'd rather get information and do their own research from their peers and the like than from you. And unfortunately, they're far less loyal. Right? Saw a recent study where 60% said they would leave their current vendor for perceived better service. And so from a marketing perspective, I think marketing has a much more strategic role than it did in the past. In the past, it was traditional, hey, you can do brand awareness and provide air cover. It was, hey, you can support what the sales folks want to do kind of in the region. But now, with the buyer in the driver's seat, marketing plays a very strategic role in needing to get out in front, needing to engage that dialogue, help shape the dialogue, help shape the decision framework far before the sales cycle even starts.
So how is your relationship with sales changing?
Well, the relationship with sales has also changed dramatically as they're coming to that realization. And I think that the biggest opportunity with sales is to deal in data, deal with fact, and that really motivates things. So one of the first things I did, and I've done in the past, which is to establish a common global dashboard. One in which I wake up and the head of global sales and services wakes up and the head of each region wakes up and looks at it consistently. So that is mapping the entire engagement cycle, the funnel all the way down, and we're now introducing post-sale adoption and success as well. So it allows us to eliminate a lot of the traditional I feel this or he said, she said, and deal in data. It also allows us to, importantly, have a predictive view into the future. So we can identify that, hey, 2 quarters out, we might need to be doing something different. Let's jump on it now before it becomes a problem or an issue.
So as marketing's changing and outcomes, are you looking for a different type of person, and are you setting up your teams differently today?
Yes, on both accounts. So, on one account, obviously you still need core domain knowledge, right, from the bottom up with your product environment, but you need a much more dynamic and data-driven organization than you have in the past. And what I mean from a dynamic standpoint is part of the beauty of shifting a lot of our efforts towards the digital environment is the fact that you can react much quicker. You can be much more agile. You can do A/B testing and really understand what the market wants and how they're reacting and what's working. And that takes a certain mindset from a traditional approach where, hey, we've locked in a campaign for a year, or we've always done this event, so we have to do the event. So it's a constantly challenging that. And then backing it up is making those decisions, based on data. And the good news now is from an infrastructure standpoint, we're beginning to have the infrastructure in place that we have access to the data, not just the data on, pipeline and conversion and how we get folks in, but post-sale data, understanding are folks adopting. If they're not adopting, what offers or engagement should we be assisting with from a marketing perspective to make sure that they're
So the team has to be more data-driven, more analytical.
Absolutely.
What about the structure? Because there's always the traditional product marketing and more common corporate marketing. Are you building different types of teams?
Yeah, I think we are. And I think one of the most significant things we've done is putting our money where our mouth is. When we say all marketing is increasingly digital marketing, we have organized in such a way where we take your traditional demand or campaign organization and we've embedded it within the digital and web team. So end-to-end, fully integrated team that is doing 2 things. Number one is making sure our integrated plan includes primarily and first and foremost digital engagement methods. And number 2, making sure we have the data to quickly test and adapt our campaign. So we're not so fixed and rigid in, hey, we set this out last December, so it's now July. If things aren't working, let's adapt, let's adjust them. And so I think organizing has really helped reinforce that. I even kind of reinforced that further by saying we're cutting the volume of email that we do in half. And that's not a magic number. Don't tell my team.
Was that dramatic for everybody? Or was
it is dramatic. I've been told there's been lots of discussions, including in the regions around, okay, how are we going to support that? And that's the dialogue that I wanted to generate. It's not about getting to a certain number or volume of emails. It's about saying, okay, number one is how should we be changing and adapting our methods to leverage digital more? And number 2 is when we do send out that email, we've got to make sure that it resonates, it lands, it achieves the objective with the target audience that we're trying to reach.
So do you have a formal marketing ops team or demand center or both?
Both. In fact, they sit on the same team. So marketing ops, strategy and planning is a common team that has the demand center, has our analytics as well. And we are actually, as a company, which helps for where we're going with the cloud, marketing also owns kind of the NPS component, so we have a good understanding of what customers are doing post-sale as well.
Okay. So what types of process improvements are you working on now to drive the modern marketing organization?
Yeah, so there's a few things I mentioned. I mentioned around digital. I mentioned around decisions being database and data driven. The other thing we're putting in place is some common governance models globally. So we have begun to unify marketing. We have a centralized, or CMO model, I think you would call it, where product marketing, digital marketing, comms, etc., are all integrated. We have dotted line integration from the regions, and what we're doing there is we've established some common governance models around what you would think, brand, messaging, campaigns, events, and spend. And that's really helped us do a couple things. Number one is gain alignment. When I first came in, we began a process of trying to develop an integrated marketing plan. I think last year we're getting the muscles under us. This year it's much more focused. Folks understand how we're going to really leverage the power of the team to execute not just globally but also locally. And this governance model is helping us take it to the next level to make sure that we have consistent branding and messaging, make sure that we have minimum thresholds of return, make sure that we are infusing the digital component in everything that we do. So I think we're really getting that good alignment, which may not have existed in the past.
Okay. So I know Citrix has always been an early adopter of technology. So what's your MarTech stack look like, and what are you guys doing differently?
Yeah, I mean the core of the MarTech stack. That's a good and a bad thing, by the way. If you're an early adopter, which Citrix was, of sales and marketing automation, you're out in front, but you also don't get the benefit of years of best practices and the like, and there tends to be a lot of customization. So as a company, we've kind of gone through a re-implementation, or near the end of the re-implementation of Salesforce. So the Sales Cloud, and we've kind of taken the approach of taking the vanilla deployment, taking guidance from them and others around how do we smooth out our processes, make sure we have those consistent global processes, global dashboards and the like, and that's really helped. Augmenting that, we have Marketo that we've really used. We've mentioned the demand center before. That's been a kind of a forcing function to make sure that we have common processes and standards in Marketo. We've identified an asset map, and we've mapped the buyer journey, and we're beginning to set up those plays on a much more consistent basis. And then we have some interesting things, around the end, around analytics. We use Adobe to manage all of our digital components. But one of the interesting things is, as I mentioned earlier, Citrix is moving to the cloud. And different parts of the product portfolio or business are moving at different paces. One particular area is around secure file sharing, what we call our share file part of the business. Consider it kind of a Dropbox for the enterprise with added layers of security and workflow and so on. And that was born and bred in the cloud, a true SaaS business. And so we've been able to gestate a lot of innovative ideas there, where as we move to the cloud, we've taken ownership of a lot more of the customer engagement cycle. So it's not just about driving awareness, driving demand, getting them to trial, but my marketing team is also responsible for trial conversions, post-sale actual adoption. And so we're using tools called Pendo that's helping us not only map that buyer journey, but proactively pushing highly personalized messages to drive those actions at the right time.
So now, so you mentioned kind of post-sale. So there's this big push for customer lifecycle engagement now. You know, marketing's not just supposed to fill the top of the funnel, but really engage throughout the lifecycle. So how are you set up to deal with that? Do you have a team that just works on customer programming and campaigns? Or?
Yeah, so the answer is we will. We're in the process of building that out. It's, to your point, as you move to the cloud, you introduce for marketing what I would call the fifth discipline. If the first four, arguably overly simplistic, are driving awareness, building demand, qualifying demand, and nurturing demand, you then have this new post-sale effort around driving customer adoption and success. And so we're building a customer adoption marketing team that will take some of the learnings that we're already seeing in the share file part of the business and kind of scale them up to support the Citrix cloud. And it really is about identifying those moments, right? Understanding what the customer is adopting, what they're not adopting, helping to be sort of their trainer. I use the metaphor of you can buy that treadmill and soon it becomes a towel rack, or you can go to the gym and engage with the trainer who teaches you how to use the treadmill, make sure you show up every day, make sure you're doing your routine. And that's kind of the role of adoption marketing, working closely with our customer success team to make sure that we are injecting at the right moment to move that customer along their journey post-sale, just like we did pre-sale.
So what are you being measured on by your boss, and then what are you measuring your team on?
Yeah. So we are undergoing a kind of a 3-year transformational journey. We call it the March to World Class. And so we've identified some kind of big 5 objectives that we're going after, ones that you would typically consider, but also adding in employee ones around kind of building this modern marketing vision. But from my boss standpoint, we have measures around awareness, so around aided awareness, unaided awareness, share of voice, and these are on the corporate scorecard. So that is a big thing as we've gone through this kind of reinvention of Citrix. The brand has needed to evolve, and the challenge of having a strong brand is that it becomes very, very challenging to evolve that brand and change people's mindset. So we're doing that both through that aided awareness, unaided awareness, and then share of voice, both in media and social. We obviously have metrics around and linked to not just pipeline, but also revenue, where we're trying to have that shared goal. So it doesn't do us any good if marketing sourced is above target and the overall pipeline is below target. It just creates a new level of friction. So we're kind of trying to eliminate that, and then we're beginning to build. I wouldn't say we're quite there yet, but taking on metrics around adoption and customer satisfaction.
Great. So what piece of advice would you give to a marketing executive just beginning your transformation?
My key advice would be to do your research first, right? Spend a lot of time talking with the constituents, both within your organization and outside, including customers, analysts, folks like yourself. But also look to other industries where good ideas are not beholden only to your industry. And then once you've settled on a common vision, be very consistent in communicating that vision both to your team and to your constituents. Focus relentlessly on data to help drive towards that. Doesn't mean you can't adjust, but it should be driven by fact and by data. I would say that the last part is constantly be that agitator, not in a negative way, but constantly be pushing your company. I think we're at an interesting time in marketing, in that because the sales cycle is dead, because the buyer rules the journey, marketing has to play a much, much more strategic role than it ever has. And I constantly challenge my team to take up that torch, to get engaged in key dialogues in the market, to make sure that we're injected into those areas of discussion early on, which may not manifest themselves in sales for a year to 2 years, but you're building that reputation. And I think reputation management is going to become so much more important as you try to establish this role as a trusted advisor.
Great advice, Tim. Thank you. Appreciate you being on the show today.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, everybody. That's a wrap.